folks, welcome back to Indaba Africa. This is Chris once again. Welcome back to Chris Wyatt Africa, folks, here on the Indaba Africa channel, part of the Indaba Broadcasting Network. It's Thursday. Thursday? Yeah, Thursday. The last day of September, 30 September 2021. He's here by popular demand. Buried somewhere under 6 meters of volcanic ash, deep in a brick and steel building under the surface of the Canary Islands. It's none other than South African, well-known radio and television personality, Gareth Cliff. Welcome, Gareth.
How are you, Chris?
Older. That's always a good outcome.
Well, that beard is pretty magnificent.
Yeah, it's getting out of control.
If that's any indication, we're in a good place and time.
Well, I tell you, here's the thing. My audience is frequently trying to coerce me into putting Viking beads into my hair. And I've actually purchased them a couple weeks ago, but I have a feeling it's going to be a little hard to be taken seriously as a journalist if I have Viking beads in my beard. But anyway, so that may come for a weekend at a rugby match and then come out on Monday or something like that. But for now, I've got them. And that's not the plan. But hey, Gareth, thanks for returning the favor, coming on the program. For folks who don't know, I think that most of my audience knows that I think it was it early August or late July, I was on your program on Cliff Central, your Gareth's guest program, that segment. And I had a great time. I really enjoyed the conversation, and it seemed to flow really well. So hopefully we'll have a good discussion today about the Fourth Estate. Yeah, I think for those unfamiliar with that, that's a French reference. The Fourth Estate refers to the media. And so we're going to talk about that today, the role of the media, whether the media is honest or dishonest, how it creates stories, how it drives narratives, like maybe the UK fuel crisis and things like that. And we're also going to talk specifically about South Africa's upcoming municipal elections. You know the elections, folks, the ones that the African National Congress worked really hard with the Independent Electoral Commission to get delayed because it was unsafe. It couldn't be free and fair. And then after the Constitutional Court directed that the elections take place, suddenly lockdown gets lowered from level 3 adjusted to level 2 adjusted, although we just heard it wasn't safe. Anyway, Gareth, any opening thoughts on the election upcoming? Are you looking forward to this one? Are you glued to your seat?
I'm less interested in elections than I was in my 20s and 30s, because I still used to think that they would change the world. And even in a country like South Africa, where the elections are quite important, because we have and have had for a very long time a party in the ANC who was so absolutely overweening and dominant that they smashed the competition, and it really didn't matter who was in opposition. I think this election will be very interesting, purely from the point of view that the ANC could not have screwed this up more if they tried. Every single obstacle they have put in their own way, they've fallen over. And it's kind of like, those cartoons where it just goes wrong for the protagonist at every step of the journey. And these guys are quite easily the most bumbling, stumbling, foolish, ignorant, and stupid people that have ever been in government. This particular generation that we have now must be such a disgraceful and embarrassing thing for the actual struggle heroes of the past to look at. I think the opposition parties are going to clean up this year. I really do.
Well, that's my thoughts. All things being equal, I think the ANC should be shellacked at the polls. I mean, as you said, it's like watching Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner try to drop the rock. Everything you could possibly do. I mean, and just when you think they can't come up with another dumb idea, bad dumb ideas from the recent past come back and haunt them, like this thing with Blade and Nzimande now and Afrikaans. That's fine. Piss off 12 million people who speak it as a first language, most of whom are people of color who are already angry at your party.
They can't help it. They are Wile E. Coyote and they're the Roadrunner. And they're like their self-inflicted wounds. I mean, it's almost like it's sadomasochism that you're watching, because
self-flagellation.
It's outrageous how badly they're managing things. But then we'll see what happens. Look, they could pull a couple of tricks out of the bag. They've tried so far. I wouldn't put it past them to do something down and dirty. But I think in the municipalities, which this is a local election.
Yep.
This isn't about the national treasury, and it isn't about where they can skim off the money that they've been stealing for 25 years. This is about service delivery, and they just have no excuses left in the bag. They have proven time and time again they're completely incompetent and incapable. There are no skills when it comes to service delivery. And people all over South Africa, especially impoverished black people who've lived in essentially anarchy for the last 10 years or more. I mean, the statistician general here put out a report 4 years ago already that qualified the audits of the various municipalities. It turns out only 7% of South Africa's municipalities are even liquid. That means that 93% of the municipalities and the people who live in them already know what anarchy feels like. They don't know what government is. And that'll speak to why so few people turn out at the polls at the moment. We've got a terrible turnout rate. It's nothing like what you had with Trump and Biden.
Well, the thing about this is, and this is the argument I've been making since last year when the lockdown levels were first eased in June of last year, is that the reason these elections are so important is because a lot of South Africans were born after the end of apartheid, and they'd never seen anything but ANC rule, so they don't know anything else. It reminds me of Zimbabwe with ZANU and ZANU-PF when it became that later. They've never known anything else, so a lot of people just expect this as a norm. And here's the thing. An opposition party that can win an outright majority in a metro can use the next 2 years between 2022 when this government will be seated, or the end of this year, and 2024 for the next national elections to show what real governance is: honest, transparent, responsive to its citizens, and service delivery, because that's what municipalities do. They do service delivery, and they should be transparent to the voters, but the ANC is not.
You could already argue that in a number of municipalities and the bigger metros, the DA, which is the main opposition party, has already shown itself to be absolutely leagues ahead. Now, by no means are they perfect. No party is, and all politicians are to be distrusted, as you know. But these guys are better administrators and bureaucrats, which is why there is such semigration to the Western Cape, which is run properly. Cape Town itself, which is an international city we can all be very proud of. And despite the fact that they also have their problems in Cape Town, it is better run than any other city in South Africa. And that's because the opposition party runs it. Pretoria, the city I live in, has been kind of run by them, but they were scuppered in their coalitions with other parties, the EFF principally, and that has put them on the back foot. But I do believe in this next election, they'll probably get 50+1 in Pretoria, which would be enough for them to be able to manage everything without having to make friends with some truly terrible people in local politics.
Well, and that is the key. And that's, last year I heard people in the Democratic Alliance who I think were probably not really thinking through what they're talking about, saying that, we'll form coalition governments in municipalities. And my argument was that coalitions are great if you have a majority on your own. Then you can bring people to your banner if you want, and you can govern and have a stronger ruling majority. But it's not going to work if the perfect example is Nelson Mandela Bay. I think Athol Trollip was a world-class mayor, and that city was on the right path. But they were beholden to minor parties with 1 or 2 seats because they didn't get enough seats to win an outright majority. And the irony is that they had 9,000 votes fewer in 2016 than they had in 2011. If the DA just retained its voting base, they would have had an outright majority.
Look, the DA has in the past not covered itself in glory either, that their campaigns have been tainted with all kinds of stupidity. They themselves were very pro-lockdown for a very long time. They've just come out this week against lockdowns, which I think is going to be a major vote swinger towards them, because people are absolutely, in Afrikaans we say, gat vol. They're sick and tired of being run into the ground by these outrageous lockdown regulations, which frankly people like me have not paid any attention to. Neither have people in the townships. They've gone ahead and done the normal stuff that they were doing before COVID, but it has eviscerated our economy. Our economy is absolutely stagnant, if not going backwards at a rate of knots. And it's essential that at least one party, in this case it's the DA, eventually stands up and says, enough with this lockdown nonsense, it must go. The other thing that I'm pleased to report is that just a short while ago, John Steenhuisen, who's the leader of the Democratic Alliance, made a pretty important call. And he said, we will not make coalitions with anybody just to rule if those people don't share our values. Because the big lesson they learned in the last municipal elections is that while they could cobble together enough votes to pass laws in the provincial assemblies, it wasn't for the right reasons. And they had to give backhanders in Johannesburg under Herman Mashaba to the EFF and many other deals that just weren't kosher. You can't operate with people who don't have the same values as you do. And I attended an interesting gathering the other day where Steenhuisen with a guy who hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. There was a little garble there. You attended a hearing.
I somehow lost you there.
Yeah, no, it must be a data connection from the cable coming out of South Africa. But you were saying you attended a thing with Steenhuisen the other day.
Yeah, and I was talking to him about the and to Salim Simanga, who's really terrific. He's the provincial head of the DA. And these guys have got plans. They've got plans to get things done. And while I've never really been keen to support a party outright, because that can be very dangerous, I just don't see any other party even sticking their heads up and being counted at this stage. We need serious triage, and these guys could probably do a better job of it than anyone else.
Well, that's been my argument with South Africans now for the past 2 years, is that if you're in a municipality where an opposition party has a legitimate chance to get a majority, vote for them, even if you don't support them. As long as the opposition party is in the EFF, I'm okay with that. But I mean, some smaller municipalities, maybe the Freedom Front Plus might have a chance in some places, or the IFP in some places. But to me, it's always been, you got to get the ANC out of power to give other people an opportunity to show what they can, and that really, really has to be the focus here. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. You share with me, because I hadn't heard that yet, that the DA is coming out saying they're now opposing the lockdown. I saw it a couple weeks ago that the Western Cape Premier Alan Winde from the DA called for a lowering of the lockdown and then a total abandonment of it altogether, and that seemed to be the first voice. So it's about time. Some minor parties have kind of talked about it. He was, unfortunately, he was very pro-lockdown in the beginning and went along with all this international bullshit about how lockdowns were a good idea. There is not any single scrap of evidence to show that lockdowns have done any countries any good. And in fact, that they've probably in the long term harmed those countries economically, socially, in terms of health and everything else in unfathomable ways. So for anyone to claim at this stage that a lockdown is good, they're just not paying attention to the facts. Well, it has worked very well for totalitarian fascist governments around the world. I mean, we see reports from the Australian Penal Colony on a daily basis about how powerful the government is there now, from Jacinda Ardern's New Zealand government, from the persecution of Christians in Canada. The list is endless. And many states here in America, the utter nonsense that's going on. No, it's pretty crazy. It's worked well for politicians. And, a lot of people...
But you see, when people like you and I bring this up, we are conspiracy theorists and dangerous ideologues, when we've got no ideology except pragmatism. And to be perfectly frank, I wasn't worried about COVID from the get-go. I don't know whether I've had it or not. If I have had it, it was so mild that I didn't even notice it. I'm in absolutely no state of fear. I have to wear a mask when I go to the shops because they won't let us shop otherwise. But pretty much everywhere I go, and I've been to restaurants, I've been out at night with friends, drinking establishments, I've had people here at my house, and not a single person has asked for hand sanitizer, masks. No one's asked if anyone's vaccinated. It's not happening. And the only people who care about this seem to be the government and people who were afraid of things before COVID as well. All kinds of things. Well,
exactly. There's some people are afraid of going out the door anytime, just a given there. Well, let me ask you this question, because I've been asking this to people around. You're on the ground. I have been to South Africa now for 2 years because of this nonsense. I'm normally there frequently throughout the year. What's going on in Pretoria? Are there signs out? I've heard that there is a proliferation of Action SA signs around Joburg for Herman Mashaba, but I've not really heard no ANC signs, nothing, no excitement. Is there any DA presence or Freedom Front Plus presence in Pretoria? Are you seeing it?
Yeah, there are, in my immediate neighborhood, I've seen a lot of DA and Freedom Front stuff. I haven't seen any ANC posters either in Johannesburg or Pretoria. Of course, they run out of money.
Yeah, they're about 200 million in debt.
They do not have any money. I mean, this is the most embarrassing thing. Our governing party in this country, which has had its greedy hands in the till for 25 years and has managed to enrich the elite members of that party to the degree that would beg a belief. I mean, we're talking about making instant overnight billionaires out of people who have absolutely no skills or capacities whatsoever, purely because they're connected to the party. Yet they cannot rustle up enough funding at this point to be able to campaign effectively. And it's so embarrassing that they couldn't even pay the people in their head office in Johannesburg. I still think that those people are probably not being paid. For the last 3 months, that's been the case. So we'll see. It's doubtful that the ANC have anything to campaign on either, because they don't have any track record that they can be proud of. So I wish them well. Of course, it couldn't happen to nicer people. Let's see what happens to them.
Well, in fact, at the end of this month, that'll make 4 months if they haven't paid salary at Luthuli House for their employees. And as I understand it, they also haven't paid the unemployment insurance fund or paid SARS taxes, yet they pocketed that money they took out of employee salaries from previous times.
Oh, yeah. No. The rest of us in South Africa, the hard-working people who do everything from manual labor to professional work to healthcare, frankly, have all been taxed as usual And the government has not given anyone any breaks. Certainly the government's salaries for all those people who are paid in the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, those salaries have stayed exactly the same. In my business, we had to cut our salaries by half in April of last year, and we only restored part of that at the sort of the middle of this year. And that shows we're expected to bear the brunt of their bad decision-making, as usual. None of this is going to count for them in the upcoming elections.
Folks, you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa here in the Indaba Africa channel, part of the Indaba Broadcasting Network. My special featured guest today is none other than South African radio and television personality Gareth Cliff, somewhere under the ash of the Canary Islands from a building. He's with us. But good to have him here. Good to have him with us. I don't know, have you watched that volcano at all? Man, that's an angry volcano. It's. I feel bad for the people of La Palma, but it makes for awe-inspiring sights. Last night, some pretty incredible explosions as one of the vents was blowing off the lava that had hardened, and it was really, I don't want to say entertaining because people are suffering. But
no,
something.
Of course. I know some people who like to go to Ibiza on holidays and get very, very drunk and high and do stupid things. I wonder what they're doing with their plans that were probably scuppered by all of this.
I think a fair number of Brits who intended to move to the Western Cape, but then property prices escalated over the past 20 years, moved to the Canary Islands instead.
Yeah.
That's got to suck for them. That's kind of a drag there, but yikes. Well, let's see. So this election, we'll see what happens. We'll talk more about this going on, but let's switch a little bit to the fourth estate very quickly. The media. Okay. Now, let me give a story here, and I'm going to tell you. Now, I was still a serving officer, so I wasn't doing broadcasts like this or YouTube or doing interviews for the most part. I was giving public presentations, but not doing interviews. A few years ago, when the mother city was affected by climate change and there was no water. At the time, every time that the mainstream media in South Africa and internationally would come up and talk about climate change, dire warnings, Cape Town is reaching day zero, I would point out that the reason Cape Town has no water has less to do with the drought that it was suffering and far more to do with neglect by the national, provincial, and local governments over the past 50 years. 35 to 45% of the water is lost by leaky pipes. It never reaches its destination. We have these communal pumps in townships where people wash cars and just leave the thing running and walk away where water is lost. There's no brown water or gray water reuse to water lawns or that sort of thing. Lots of mismanagement, and we can blame it on the National Party, the ANC, and the DA. All of them deserve blame. But I talked about this. And endlessly, the mainstream media kept reporting over and over it was climate change. This week, I finally found a story saying that Western Cape, all of their reservoirs are full, over capacity. So if the climate change has turned Cape Town and the Western Cape into Sahara, 4 years later, what's going on? I mean, that seems to me a story that the media hyped up and misled people. Yeah. Climate change may play a role, may have contributed to drought, but that's not why there was no water in Cape Town.
We know that there are two kinds of actors when it comes to climate change. There are those people who are genuinely, do-good people who care about the environment, who are worried about what human beings are doing to the planet, and will, not necessarily by directly doing any research or finding out any facts and figures, they'll be biased towards, maybe because they feel responsible, which is something we should encourage in the world today when people feel responsible for things. They will report and perhaps over-report that the planet's in decline and that human beings are doing terrific damage. None of that is actually terribly controversial. I think all of us agree that over the years, pollution and all the rest of it has caused enormous problems, and that we aren't particularly the best stewards of the planet that we could be. I think those people are not nefarious or dangerous people. I think they probably mean well. They just don't necessarily have the facts and figures at their fingertips to be able to justify the position that they want to occupy of being friends of the environment, something that a lot of us feel. I certainly feel that way too. I'm a fan of people who look after their own yard for a start. I mean, if you just do that, that's a good start. If you don't even do that, you have no room talking to other people about how to do things on the planet. And then you get the second group of people who are, by design, trying to misinform us and misdirect people. And those people use climate change as a catch-all for any number of really, really obviously stupid left-wing agenda points. And climate change seems to them to be the last kind of stand that they can take. When they run out of economic arguments, which they do fairly quickly when they're arguing with free market capitalists, when they run out of social arguments, as they have with the bodies piling up for everything that's been left-wing and has ruined huge swathes of this earth. When they run out of arguments for health in the case of COVID, then what they do is they bring their boogeyman of climate change in, and they parade someone like Greta Thunberg around, and then we're all expected to just buy it as some kind of religious doctrine. And it has a religious nature.
It is religious. I call them religious zealots.
Yeah. And this is extremely off-putting to people like me who actually do care about truth and civilization and science. Not because I'm a climate change denier, which they're likely to call me anyway, even though I say I'm not, but because I think these people's motives are bad. I don't believe them and I don't trust them. It's like getting your information from people who you know do not have your best interests at heart. I know that the media, not only here in South Africa, the mainstream media, but the mainstream media in most of the Western civilized world do not have the interests of the ordinary people of those countries at heart. They're not interested in reporting truth. They're interested in pushing agendas, and we can see it because they push them so hard that it's now obvious to anyone, even the people who have denied for the longest time that it's happening. And I find that suspicious. The fact that they keep on trying to shepherd us into making decisions that are against our own good would indicate to me in the most clear and obvious fashion, these people are not to be trusted. And the media have lost huge amounts of credibility with massive swathes of the population, both in America and South Africa. In fact, I think Congress in the US, which has never had a favorable approval rating, has more approval from the average American than the mainstream media. People just don't believe people like Chris Cuomo or Stephen Colbert or Joy Reid on MSNBC. People don't believe those guys. And here in South Africa, the mainstream media publications, the newspapers and the television shows are mostly discredited as well.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great point. It's interesting. I'm a conservationist. I grew up on a farm for part of my youth. Ran a dairy farm, and you don't piss in your own backyard. You take care of you're a good steward of nature's resources, and you conserve things. I get tired of walking along the roads because I exercise. I don't run as much anymore. I walk a lot now, and I got tired of seeing rubbish on the road. I'm not going to pick up all the rubbish. I'd never get anywhere. There's so much tossed out of cars, but I do pick up the aluminum cans. Aluminum, when you recycle aluminum cans, you save 95% of the energy it takes to take bauxite and turn it into aluminum. And it's a simple thing. Last year, I recycled over 100,000 cans just from exercise and hiking. Yeah, it's crazy.
Incredible.
It is, but that's just how many cans people throw out. Now, it's usually the same people who are hypocritical, telling us to turn our thermostat down, live in caves, and not consume anything, while they use their iPhones and drive around in their luxury battery-powered cars that destroy mountains to get the rare earth elements to make the batteries. The hypocrisy is off the charts. And here's another one. Now, this is a story. You've got a team of envoys from Europe and from other places, I think from the U.S., who are currently in South Africa, talking to South Africa's government about giving South Africa hundreds of billions of dollars to wean South Africa off of coal for energy. And my first thought about that is, rather than shut down coal-fired plants, how about getting Eskom to deliver electricity 365 days a year to every household and business that needs it before you start decommissioning power plants and coming up with solar, thermal, and concentrated solar power and this other nonsense?
I mean, this is all pie in the sky. We can start talking about alternative sources of energy when we have any fucking source of energy at the moment. Most people in this country are glad to have electricity when we have it. And that's because it's been mismanaged to the tune of hundreds of billions of rands over the past probably 10 to 12 years when it started to decline under the ANC. And they stripped out the infrastructure that provides us with power. Now, we have plenty of coal in South Africa. We are a massive coal rich country. We have incredible resources in that respect. And most of our power stations burn coal. 95%. Whether we like it or not. That's what we've got. So you can build as many solar farms as you'd like, and those are possibly something we can think about in the future. We've got the territory for that. We've got plenty of sunshine. And maybe one of these days we can make enough of the country into a solar farm that it would be able to provide 10% or 20% of our power. But more than that is an absolute pipe dream. And it's not just going to take European or American money in order to do that. It's going to take someone replacing all those jobs in mining, because coal mining in this country is a massive part of our economy. Mining in general is still one of the biggest contributors to our GDP. So solve those problems first before you start telling us to move into renewables. And I don't want to follow your ideological point of view on this just because you think you're doing something good for the environment, when it means that me and my fellow South Africans are going to sit in the dark every night because everything is broken. And I don't trust, if you give this government every cent that is available in the world economy, and they will squander it. They will waste it away on nonsense. And I promise you, you'll have nothing to show for it by the end.
Well, I absolutely agree. I mean, for starters, $5.6 billion, 90 billion rand at the then exchange rate from July and August of last year, 285 million from the African Development Bank, 1 billion from the BRICS Bank or New Development Bank, and 4.3 billion US dollars from the IMF to the African National Congress. Where's that money? Where did it go?
Well,
what happened to it?
I can tell you where some of it went, because even the president's spokesperson and our Minister of Health were both fingered in deals, which got them tenders for PPE, which is personal protective equipment. Again, a couple of $1 million here, a couple of $1 million there. These are two people who were responsible for communicating the government's health policy and for helping us to figure out how we could keep ourselves safe during a world pandemic. These are the people we trusted, and what do we get for it? Theft.
Digital vibes.
Right,
that's a
exactly.
whole other one.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a whole other one there. The Digital Vibes communications contract. We just had 6 more members of the Ministry of, or the Department of Health, Breast Africa, it's ministry. The Department of Health suspended today over allegations of their involvement, including Anban Pillay, whom the Special Investigative Unit basically said, this guy is a racketeer. He's extortion, corruption, embezzlement, theft, illegal tenders. They basically said he should be indicted with. So basically, the Special Investigative Unit almost did everything except prefer charges against this guy. Of course, we will see what will happen, because we're still waiting for Jacob Zuma to face trial over a arms deal from 20 years ago.
I'm not hopeful. I'm not hopeful that much will happen. There are a lot of judges who've already been replaced with people who are sympathetic to the ANC, and I'm being kind when I say sympathetic. They're card-carrying members of the party, and they've been put there because they're there to make sure that ANC people don't go to jail. And the judiciary is one of the branches that we've been able to express some confidence in up to now. You see, what's got to happen in this next election and in the one that comes after it is that the ANC has to get below 50%, and we have to start cleaning out all the places that they've ruined. Yep. And it's going to take a while. But I'm believe it or not, despite the fact that I'm vituperative in this interview, I'm extremely optimistic about the future of this country, because I think we've got a population of people who have no other option but to make it work. And we are a lot more decisive, we're a lot more steadfast, and we'll stand together better than the government will. And that, to me, is enough reason for us to hold on.
Well, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. First off, folks, big word alert, vituperative. Today's word of the day is vituperative. Big word alert here on Chris Wyatt Africa. Thanks for that one, Gareth. I used to do that all the time when I use a word that's seldom used in the English language, and people are like, what's that? But we had a super chat from Smee again. He's here again. And he says, Brian Donkey Cliff, for your honest input. He gave some rands. Thank you so much for that super chat. Yeah, folks, you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa here on the Indaba Africa channel. My special feature guest is none other than South African television and radio personality and internet star Gareth Cliff. And here, he's no longer in the Canary Islands. We'll stop that myth. We're not going to spread fake news here. But let's get back to our conversation here, talking about the media. So you work in media in South Africa. There is aren't there bodies that govern the conduct of the media there? Are they voluntary organizations? Are they set up by the state? And don't you have some sort of ombudsman if the media misbehave?
Yeah, I mean, that's a part of the old media that's very regulated. And in South Africa, there were industry bodies that were set up by, for example, I was in broadcasting, so radio. There was a Broadcasting Complaints Commission, which was run largely by people in the industry and private business who tried to regulate things so that government wouldn't. And it was quite a good system. I mean, I got into trouble with them every other day and twice on Sundays. But I think I still have the record for the most number of complaints. But that was also because I was a 20-year-old hothead who was ready to say just about anything to get ratings. I think now...
Oh, is that the secret? Now, hang on, folks. Let me just...
So right now, I think that there are those bodies still, and they still do a reasonable job. But there are increasingly warnings from government that they're going to implement all kinds of new legislation that they will hope to control and regulate the internet with. And I don't think that that's possible. You know, if they try to do that, they've got to also try to regulate Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Google, and they're never going to be able to do that. The government doesn't have enough lawyers, and they don't have anyone smart enough in their policy-making unit to be able to figure out how to do that. I have a private independent media business, which has been running for 7.5 years, and we are kind of outside of the reach of many of those mainstream media businesses and the government, much to their chagrin. I'm not anti-government in this respect. I don't dislike governments per se, but I'm mistrustful of politicians as a general rule. And you can see why. If you watch what's happened all over the world with politicians in the last 2 years, you can see why every time you give them any power for free, they not only grab that, but they grab extra things that you didn't give them. And they're a bit kleptocratic in that respect. You can't really be sure that when you go to sleep at night, they aren't going to try and steal things from your house while you're sleeping.
Well, let me ask you this question. Since your company is established now, it's been around a while, a little bit. If we can peel back a little bit for the audience, if you're able to share this, my efforts at a media effort here are just a little over a year old, getting this going after I left active service. So, of course, I'm very focused on, if and when I hire staff, if I get larger, that how I'll set standards and how I deal with things. Do you, as a media company, do you have your own, I would assume, some sort of internal standards and what guidelines are, where people can go, what they can say, and how that works?
There's always the law, and
the
law, and the law of the nation is that you cannot actively promulgate violence, which in South Africa is part of the hate speech clause of our constitution.
Yep.
You can't spread untruths unless you want to be sued for defamation and for being an irresponsible media body. There are certain things that come into play that you don't require new legislation for, and you don't need new rules to make people abide by. We don't allow for racism, sexism, discrimination of any of that kind on our channel. But we do allow for free expression of opinion, and particularly unpopular opinion. And I like to balance every opinion that I think is a little bit to the right with one to the left. And it's not all down to me, fortunately. I mean, we've over the course of our history we've put out, at some point, we were doing 40 shows a week, 5 days a week, which was insane. And we never really ran afoul of any of the rules, any of the laws. We've so far had no serious legal trouble, and I think mostly we've been a quite welcome independent voice in the South African media landscape. And there are others who are doing probably an even better, in terms of their journalism, an even better job. There are plenty of publications in South Africa that have gone online and are doing a tremendous job helping people to hear the truth. We're not a journalistic body. We're just a media business. And some of our shows are pure entertainment. Some of them are information. Some of them are inspiration. And some of them are empowerment.
Well, definitely some of my shows are pure entertainment, especially the Night Owls edition. That's more of a, it's just, I do cover news stories, but we just kind of chat and talk. I think a lot of people are curious about my military career, my experience overseas, some things I've done. So I talk a lot about that. And plus I'm a huge world traveler. I love traveling and as a historian, political scientist. So that comes up, but no, absolutely. So, it's interesting because one of the things I found with my developing my brand is that you get people who are very inflexible, who may agree with a lot of your views, but the moment you step out of line, they're like, hey, you can't, no. And it's, but it's not about that. I'm trying to be an independent journalist here, and I'm trying to be objective. Now, I am biased. We all have bias, but I'm honest about my bias. Unlike the mainstream media, I don't cover it up. If I'm going to be biased, I'll tell you up front, this is my view, and this is why I'm right. But so far as talking about things, I like to give the balanced side. I talk about the other side. I had Leonard Max on my program yesterday, the Freedom Front Plus candidate.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he was a guest on my program yesterday, and a very Lecca conversation. Very interesting to hear what he had to say. And some people were, why are you going to get that guy on? He's just a party jumper. He's an opportunist. Well, I mean, maybe he is, maybe he's not. Let's ask his view and listen to his thoughts and then judge for ourselves what he says.
It's weird how people, make a judgment on somebody before they've even heard them plead their case. Some of these people would make terrible judges because they wouldn't be listening the whole way through the trial. You need to hear the arguments from both sides. And so many people who I encounter today, whether it's on matters like, coronavirus, lockdowns, global climate change,
transgenderism,
international politics, transgenderism. Half of these things, you can tell almost immediately that these people have never heard a good argument against their position. And I think that it's a very, very it's an arresting thing to meet someone who's only really got doctrine and dogma and brainwashing in their arsenal of tools when it comes to an argument. And the moment they're confronted by a different point of view, which is also sometimes accompanied by fact, and sometimes by someone who's more articulate than they are in proposing a better argument, they fall to pieces. And I think that you need to be sure of your convictions, and you need to be sure of them on a first principles basis. Otherwise, you're looking for trouble if you argue with people who are probably going to know more than you and may just make you cry.
Well, last year on my program, I had a known personality whom I won't mention on my channel because I don't want people to just take it in the wrong context. But this person told me I was naive because rather than focusing on the murder of white Afrikaans-speaking South Africans on farms, I discuss the issue in terms of rural insecurity because people are vulnerable in rural areas. The police can't respond. They don't have the equipment. And if you look at the statistics, it's not just white farmers, although that's a cause I've been championing for many years in the classified world, in the policy world, in the U.S. government, and then publicly since I've retired. But it's a rural insecurity issue. And I was told that I was naive. Yeah. It's not that. It's white genocide. And I was like, okay, all right, I really don't know what to say about that. You're obviously not interested in having a conversation. You have a worldview, and you're inflexible.
Yeah, you get ideologues, and I'm afraid that I was raised in people talk about the scientific method now, but certainly even in my hobby, which is inorganic chemistry, I like to dabble in architecture. I read about history and philosophy and science, and all of these things are great. I'm not an expert in any of them, but the method is the same for all of them. You try to ascertain in laboratory conditions what is true. And in order to ascertain what is true, particularly in the much more numinous fields of, the humanities, you try to ascertain what's true by having rigorous conversation, sometimes debate, and sometimes it even gets a bit aggressive, and that's fine. But if you're not prepared to be challenged on your first principles, and you're not prepared to bring evidence and facts that back up your argument, then when you lose, it's all your fault. And then the smart thing to do, as I have when I've lost, and I have lost a number of times, is to then adapt your thinking and to go, well, clearly I was wrong on this front. I now need to improve my point of view on this. I'm going to change my course of thinking on this, and I'm going to keep incorporating new information to make sure that it complies with where my worldview is at the moment. Too many people are ideologues. They're invested in the outcome without being too concerned with how you get to it. And many of them, particularly the young people who've been, poisoned in the university system in the Western world, in Britain, in America, and in South Africa, those people actually don't know very much at all. They've just been taught a number of rhetorical statements. They've been given some platitudes, and they go out into the world and they think if they speak these magic words, it'll make them sound clever.
No, absolutely. It's I call that intellectual dishonesty. That's exactly what it is, intellectual dishonesty. It's interesting because not to spend a lot of time talking about the States, but people keep going on and on about the police hunting down black men in this country. And I make the argument that 13.5% of our population is black, including mixed race Americans who identify as black. That's 45 million Americans. So ostensibly 22.5 million of them are black men. Yet in 2019, police-involved shootings result in the deaths of 308 black men. If the police are actively hunting down black men and shooting them with no justification, these are the least efficient hunters on the planet. Is the point I make to them. It's and that just falls on deaf ears.
That's not what systemic racism looks like, right?
Yeah,
systemic racism would be if blacks were responsible for 20% of the crime in America, but they were 60% of the people arrested. That would be systemic racism. That
would be problematic. That's something that would warrant looking at. Absolutely. No, but the intellectual dishonesty is off the charts. Let me take care of a couple of super chats here. Ozioba said, excuse me. Ozioba said, good evening and thank you for this insightful live stream. How do you think we can get more youth involved in politics? I'm not so sure it's going to be a happy answer there, Ozioba. Youth in politics is like unicorns and leprechauns. It's a diminishing return and almost non-existent. Your thoughts, Gareth?
Well, there's that brilliant, I think it's Chesterton quote where he says, if you're young, and you're not liberal, you don't have a heart. If you're old and you're not conservative, you don't have a brain. And I've always maintained that student politics and the heat and the passion that's involved in what young people believe, and while it's untested, and in almost every society where the young are allowed too much of a say before they're able to really figure out responsibilities like tax and paying a mortgage and raising their own children, they should not be allowed to make more than their proportion of the decisions in that political system. Young people are full of the vim and vigor and the fire of politics, but they haven't got the comprehension of the real world and what that real world could teach them. I speak for myself here. When I was 20, I was a left-wing lunatic. I was completely in all the categories that you would imagine a left-winger would be in. And I think I said some terrifically stupid things just to sound popular, or just to sound like I was a rebel and I knew something, or that I was slightly smarter than the person next to me who also knew nothing. I don't think that I'm necessarily the wisest person in the room now, but I've certainly learned that your elders, and especially those who aren't addled, you don't want the oldest people in the whole world running things, as you have in the United States. But you want
shots
you
fired.
Want people. Well, even in the ANC, I mean, there are no young people left in the ANC's leadership. They're all over 60 years old, and that's not a bad age. 60 is okay, but we're talking 80 in the case of some people, and there's no reason in the world that we would let an 80-year-old run a factory, just like we wouldn't let an 8-year-old run a factory. And we should be the same with politics.
Absolutely. Well, I've got another one here, too. Hey, folks, if you're not a subscriber to Chris Wyatt Africa, take a second and smash that button right below you to become a subscriber here. You get independent, objective, and when it's biased, I'm honest about it, news coverage of the continent of Africa, Southern Africa also, and a focus on South Africa, too, and all the countries and organizations that influence and affect Africa, like the United States, the People's Republic of China, and the European Union. So become a subscriber. We appreciate that. Erica had a super chat here. She said, I followed Gareth since 702. Well, that's going back a ways, isn't it? Chris and Gareth, please, can we have your combined voices like this interview more often? SA needs to hear you. Well, we'll see what happens. If that's very kind of you. Thank you, Erica, for that. And another one just came in from Brett. Says, guest thoughts about Zenani Mandela being South Africa's ambassador to South Africa. I didn't know we were planning on going that direction. But
Zenani.
Oh, to South Korea. I said South Africa. I meant South Korea.
Yeah.
Sorry. Slip of the tongue there.
I've met Zenani Mandela, and I find her to be a charming and extremely friendly, lovely person. I don't know whether she's any good at being an ambassador, but if you have the Mandela name, it kind of gives you the intro into pretty much any job you want. And the Foreign Service is, it's a nice place to work, especially if you're an ambassador. You kind of cut a few ribbons, shake a few hands, occasionally make sure some trade deal happens. But I don't think that those are priorities of this government or our Foreign Relations Department, which I hope is better under Naledi Pandor than it was under Maiti Nkwana Mashabane, the previous minister. Good God, was she useless. So I think Naledi is someone who means well. She has a little more credibility than many of our ministers. And I certainly hope that her ambassadors and the appointments that she's made are slightly more meritorious than the ones who were made under the Jacob Zuma administration, which we know was just a kind of reward for for loyal comradeship.
Loyalty to the Thule House. Let me get to a couple more real quick. Super sticker from Patrick saying cool. And I'm not familiar with what you said a decade ago, but now it's interesting because I had a conversation with him after our program on Wednesday. Ronaldo Jos is in the stream now, and he said, "Hey, I gotta reach out to Gareth and talk about him coming back on my program." I don't know if this is the way to do it, Ronaldo. He gave me a super chat and he says, "We, the people of Port Elizabeth, will never forget what you said over a decade ago.
Yeah.
Your PE passport is still revoked." What's he talking about?
I want to say that long before Donald Trump started calling places shitholes, I had called the city of Port Elizabeth a shithole, and I maintain that position. I was. There was an article in the newspaper after I said it was the armpit of South Africa. If South Africa was made up of body parts, Port Elizabeth would be the armpit. It's a horrible place. It's like Detroit, but not as pretty.
Oh gosh.
And certainly not as rich. And Detroit's not a rich city.
No.
So that'll tell you everything you need to know. But I have friends there. I have there's a couple that I know really well who just had a baby, and they live there and they love it. I mean, some people like living in mud huts. Some people like living without electricity. I don't know why, but they like it there. And Port Elizabeth it's always been a very, very nice place to me, but I insist on having and retaining the right to be as horrible to them as I like.
Well, I mean, some people like the rubbish to pile up outside their home.
There was a funny incident where the mayor, this is 10 years ago, the mayor of PE banned me, in the news from coming. But I went there just to prove a point. And I said I would make an apology if the mayor would invite me to their office and give me tea, but they never did invite me. So I think they're still smarting.
Apparently, there's a lot of people from the Eastern Cape in the stream because PK, exclamation point. And Ronaldo says he's drinking now. Yeah. Listen, Gareth.
Well, I'm so impressed that people from the Eastern Cape even have internet. That's really nice to them.
Well, I suppose you could say you'd be impressed. They also speak multiple languages. That's kind of impressive too.
No, in this country, we have 11 official languages. Everybody here speaks more than one. It's not impressive.
So, Gareth, when we first set the stream up, you were going to have to jet 10 to the hour. Can you stay today, or is it you still got to go?
I have to leave at 10 too. I've got another important.
We didn't really get to this, but let me just get to something very quickly here and adjust fire on this. So it's interesting that the media they paint narratives. Our media, your media, European media. It's very interesting. Paul Kagame spoke when he visited troops in Cabo Delgado province. Al Jazeera said that he said we're committed to the long term here, and U.S. News and World Report and Western media said we can't stay here forever. This is not our mission. He did say both things, but it's funny how media focus on different things to push a narrative. One, they're going to get out, they're going to stay, and it's the same thing. Now, two things very quick about the story. One, the endless reporting on farm murders, plasmoord in South Africa by the media when a white South African is murdered, but neglect when a black, a colored, or Indian for the most part. And now there's been, it seems to me, almost a total absence of reporting on farm murders that have taken place in the past 4 or 5 months in the build up to the election. That seems to be intentional, and I think it's callous. And one more thing about that in the media. So when Julius Malema and the EFF rocked up in Pretoria on the 25th of June to demand that the government accept the Chinese and Russian jabs or they would make the country ungovernable, there were at least 5,000 people gathered with no social distancing, most not wearing masks, in clear violation of lockdown regulations, which said 100 people at outdoor gathering, an illegal gathering. No media coverage about prosecution, no arguments, no op-eds about why aren't they prosecuting these people. And then we had a worldwide rally for freedom and democracy take place in Cape Town at Sea Point. And magically, the number is 500 now, although that violates what the CONCOURT told the government. But 500, and SABC, the state media, and News 24, captured media in my view, both reported within hours 600 people in an illegal gathering. Charges are being filed against these criminals. Isn't it interesting how you have this complete disconnect between what's really happening when something so obvious is happening and is ignored by the media, and then something that's used to go after a certain group of people? And this is consistently the case all over. Well,
what's your question? Because I'm not surprised.
Am I wrong, or have I got it right?
Well, it sounds like you are. First of all, on the issue of farm murders, I'm not an expert in this, and it is an extremely involved and intricate area of study in South Africa. It's something that I don't completely understand. While I have friends who live on farms, that's anecdotal. I don't know what the statistics are around this, but I certainly know that they're not pleasant or welcome. And no one in this country wants to see the backbone of our agricultural sector ruined. And of course, we don't want to see lives lost, far more important than the economic consequences of this sort of thing. I think there are instigators. I mean, when the EFF threatened to shut the country down, that's like, that's like when Rand Paul says he's going to stop a bill in Parliament in the US, in Congress in the US. It's not going to happen, except that Rand Paul's smart and the EFF aren't. I don't think that we need to pay too much attention to the media and their narratives, because they have ruined their own credibility. They have laid waste to their own ability to be considered repositories of knowledge, to be considered faithful and interlocutors in good faith. As a result of that, I think most people just accept that they misreport on purpose. It's not a mistake. They're doing this because it's part of what they do. They're mostly after clickbait. They don't get clickbait from being honest. They get it Clickbait delivers
sensational.
The hits. Yeah, sensationalism. And if that's what turns you on, and if it turns on enough people, good. Let them continue doing it. I don't trust them. You shouldn't trust them. You should find your own verification of these sources. Just because someone calls themselves a journalist doesn't mean a damn thing. Just because they call themselves a professor doesn't mean a damn thing. And just because they say they have a degree doesn't mean a damn thing. Interrogate it on your own. Figure out for yourself what you want to and won't want to do, because you are still your best bet for making decisions around your own life that can have very dangerous consequences if you don't consider those things.
Well said and very considered. And that's what I tell my audience all the time. Hey, don't take my word for it. If you listen to what I have to say, you agree with it, that's fine. But look it up yourself. And oftentimes I give people the sources where I get my information because it's critical. One more super chat and I'm going to get you out of here. Smee again, who's here again, says, Brian Donkey once again, Gareth. I've also listened to you since 702 days and I salute your honesty and truth. Well, with that, Gareth Cliff, thank you so much for coming on Chris Wyatt Africa. It's a pleasure. And as we build up to the election, we'll see what happens. And maybe we can link up again either here on your program or back on Chris Wyatt Africa. Good luck, whatever you got going the rest of the day. And I think we've got an interesting next 4 weeks.
Thank you so much, Chris. Good to see you.
All right, cheers. All right, so that's Gareth Cliff, ladies and gentlemen, from Cliff Central. I'll let him drop off, and we'll wrap up the program. My many thanks to my special featured guest today, Gareth Cliff. It was a pleasure having him on. Good conversation. So many things to unpack. We only got to a handful of those, but I think nonetheless it was a very fruitful and interesting discussion. I think people engaged very well here. Ronaldo bringing up a 10-year-old story of the crap hole of Port Elizabeth. That was interesting. I actually vaguely remember that now. That was before I really knew much about Gareth. I just remember that story making the news back in the day. I didn't know what Ronaldo was talking about, but thanks for that. Thanks to everybody who tuned in for the stream. Well, our dear leader, well, yours and mine, the race-hustling President Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of the African National Congress, which, of course, is more important than being the president of the Republic of South Africa, as his business card would attest to. He will be giving a live news conference this evening at 8 p.m. South Africa time. That's 2 p.m., a little over an hour from now here in the U.S. I'll be covering it live with commentary, biting and hopefully witty commentary as he speaks. But the challenge has become that the more that Ramaphosa has told the same false narrative and lies for the past 18 months, the better he's become at it. He remembers more of it. So he doesn't need his iPad. So he can actually do it just speaking from the cuff. And when he does that, it's hard to get a word in edgewise. A year and a half ago, when Ramaphosa was reading from his iPad, he would have to pause to make sure he understood the words he was reading. And that gave me a chance to interject. Well, we'll see what happens today. President Cyril Ramaphosa live here on Chris Wyatt Africa at 2 p.m. today on Thursday, September 30th, 2021. Once again, my many thanks to my special feature guest, Gareth Cliff. That was brilliant. Really enjoyed having him on. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thank you for the super chats. If you're not a subscriber, hey, you're going to like this channel. I'm an American oak. I'm not a South African, and I talk about Africa, and you might be surprised to find out I actually know what I'm talking about. If you don't believe me, do a little research about me, and you'll find out about it. Anyway, folks, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm going to go ahead and, I might take any questions here real quick. Ozzy Oba says, thanks for the live stream. Debbie says, thanks, team. Chris, well done. One of the best. I guess he meant the interview. Marilyn says, brilliant interview. Great stream. Thanks to both of us. Okay, what else we got there? Beth is going to join us later. Most cities in South Africa are skeletal shadows of what they were 35 years ago. I agree with Gareth. Even the name sucks now. Oh, you talking about for Port Elizabeth? Okay. Yeah. So thank you all for the super chats. Can you imagine being on a stage with 133 viewers? Your like is a free welcome. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty cool. Well, I've been on the stage with a few thousand people out in the audience before, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, it is interesting. It definitely gets your attention. You know, if you don't speak in front of crowds, and I've done a lot of public speaking throughout the course of my career, if you don't do it for a while, even a very accomplished and very adept public speaker, you get a few butterflies in the stomach until you get going there. I keep a little tricks in my bag in case I have and it's been a while since I did public speaking. I'll be speaking next week at a university in Florida to college students. And it's been a while since I've given a public presentation because of the Rona. But I have a few tricks up my sleeve that help me be calm and comfortable, and always have a few little war stories in my kit bag sitting right there in the cerebrum that I can call up to help kind of break the ice or if I get off track. And so it is interesting, though. But public speaking is an art. It really is an art. It's not simply, I was going to interrupt Gareth there because he was talking about science. And I said, no, Gareth, you don't understand. Science is settled. I didn't get a chance to use that one. Kevin Johnson and Ronaldo are going at each other here in the chat. Not sure what that's all about, but they're good-natured ribbing, I take it is, there. I hope that's the case. But Ronaldo, Port Elizabeth, that's a good one. Thanks for bringing that one up, Ronaldo. Yep, what else we got here? Kevin Johnson says, thanks for a great show. Much appreciated. No, I enjoyed it myself. Too early for me, says Vutsarko. 6 p.m. is too early? Oh, Vutsarko tends to be a night owl. Okay. Yeah, well, we'll be on at 8 o'clock, and you can probably catch President Cyril Ramaphosa's stream probably on Ronaldo. He'll usually cover those things, and you can certainly catch it on here. And you're welcome to tune in either one. Love to have you on our program, though. Yeah, it would be great. But thank you all so much for the super chats. Thank you for the questions. I got to as many as I could, but as you can see, when Gareth and I get in a conversation, we just keep going. It's not like there's a pause here. Interesting. But I'm still looking at Ronaldo's super chat. That's funny. That's just too funny. But thank you all so much for for sharing your questions and asking. Yeah, so a lot of you have been following Gareth for a very long time, since the 702 days on the radio. That is interesting. What is that? I stopped listening to 702 and Gareth left. Yeah, no, I quit listening to National Public Radio when they fired the guy who used to do All Things Considered. What's his name now? I forget. He was a fantastic host on there. And they fired him many years ago, and that was it. I quit listening to National Public Radio because he was wildly popular, and I thought they mistreated him. I can't remember that guy's name now. It's been 20 years since I last listened to that network. It's crazy. It's crazy when how you abandon. You know, I stopped watching Fox News when they fired Bill O'Reilly, not because I was a Bill O'Reilly fan, but because the direction Fox News was going. I trimmed back my viewing greatly. And then in the run up to the election last year in the USA, I couldn't watch Fox anymore. They were nauseating. Most of the people on that network became pundits. They're supposed to be journalists. They're actually just pundits making opinion. And they're not being honest about their opinion. They're just acting as if it's factual and news. And then the final nail in the coffin for Fox News was them fraudulently calling Arizona for Biden 3 hours before the polls even closed in Arizona, dissuading thousands of people from going to the polls in an election that was decided by just over 9,000 votes. That's criminal. The media should be sanctioned for actions like that. The other networks, the captured networks of the left, didn't do that. It was Fox News that first called Arizona for Biden 3 hours before the polls even closed. It's disgraceful. Unbelievable. Funny how they went to one of the key battleground states and did that to affect the vote. Yeah, interesting how that happened. Yeah, the stream went by very quickly, Valerie. I was backpedaling here to try to get key questions in. I had to get that one at the end, and it turned out the way I presented it wasn't as a question. Gareth said, so what's your question? It was more of a statement. Yeah, it was two questions rolled into one, and I kind of made it as a statement instead of a question because the clock was ticking. The clock was ticking there. Yeah, no, he told me in advance he could only stay until 10 till he's got another engagement, so he's got to head off for that. So nonetheless, it was great to have him on. And by the way, he was very responsive when I asked him to come on the program. The gap between my appearance on Cliff Central and now wasn't because of Gareth. It was because I traveled for consulting work to Colorado and then fell ill for 3 weeks and then didn't get around to asking him until last week. And when I did, he said, hey, let's make it happen. And so he came on today. So that was really great. The intent was to talk about the media. We did talk about the media, but we spent a fair amount of time talking about South Africa's election, which I think is fascinating. Fascinating stuff. Patrick says, press the like or your tea will burn your lip. Okay. I haven't heard that statement before, and I don't know if that's true, but go ahead and smash the like button, folks. There's close to 100 people here currently now. How are we doing? Speaking of what happened to all the votes that were altered in Canada and Europe during the 2020, I have no idea what you're talking about, Sean, which election and what was altered. So we got over 100 likes. Thanks for that. A little bit of chat revenue. No new members, but that's okay. And Patrick says, great show, sir. Well, thanks a lot, folks. Yeah, it was interesting. Only caught the second half. Was very interesting. Well, Flesh and go back and watch it from the beginning. Nice thing about YouTube, one of the few nice things, is that you can go back and watch the stream and you can jump ahead to wherever you want and skip over parts if you don't like it. So feel free to go back and watch that. We'd love to have you do that. And so, folks, my special feature guest today was Gareth Cliff from Cliff Central. It was interesting to talk to him about South African politics, about the media, and, well, actually spent some time talking about climate change, religious zealots. That was fascinating as well. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll be back on the air in 1 hour from now exactly. I'll be back on for Cyril Ramaphosa's address to South Africa, ostensibly to talk about the lockdown, and I suspect the ANC is probably going to ease restrictions even more as it needs more space to campaign. So we'll see. The scientists only caught the last part. Again, please go back and watch it from the beginning. This was a really interesting conversation, at least I thought so, and most people in the chat tend to agree with that, and that's kind of where we're at. So you can go back and catch that. I'll be on in 1 hour. for Ramaphosa's live stream. You're welcome to come to this channel and watch it because unlike a few other channels where 10 or 20,000 people show up and the chat just zips by, you can't even get your comments in. On my channel, we typically get with Ramaphosa between 75 and 200 viewers. And most people who want to chat can join the chat. I don't even have to put on slow mode. So yeah, please feel free to come join us at 8 p.m., which is 2 p.m. in the East Coast of the United States. And that's 1 hour from now. And I'll see you guys there. That's it for this stream. Once again, my thanks to my special feature guest, Gareth Cliff. Tomorrow, Neil De Beer and Fatima Abdul back on the channel from the UIM, United Independent Movement, the political party hoping to make waves in this election. Not likely to make any big waves, but they might make a few waves, winning a few council seats. But Neil De Beer will be back on the program with Fatima Abdul tomorrow at the usual time. And so looking forward to that. Don't forget on Rugby Ascendant, my sister channel, where I only cover rugby, do interviews of rugby players, former rugby players, rugby executives, officials, and even fans. On that channel, on Rugby Ascendant, I've got 4 games this weekend I'm covering. We're approaching 300 subscribers on there. That's pretty cool. We got 281. So Rugby Ascendant, let me give you the channel link if you want to check it out. So we gained 2 subscribers overnight. This is Rugby Ascendant, folks. Go check out Rugby Ascendant if you want to hear live reaction commentary as games are underway. A lot of people like to listen to me and they tune into SABC, or not SABC, to Super Sport and watch the game, but then they listen to my commentary and turn down the volume on Super Sport. But 4 games this weekend I'll be covering. Tomorrow afternoon, after my interview with Neil De Beer and Fatima Abdul, I will be covering CONCOURT versus the Bulls. This is the second game in the URC, United Rugby Championship for them, live reaction comedy. You won't see the game. You'll just be able to hear my commentary. And then the Springboks versus the All Blacks. That's on Saturday morning, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think it's 6 a.m. Yeah, let me double check the time on that. And that would make it noon. That's correct. 6 a.m. on Saturday. The Springboks, the last Rugby Championship test. And either the Springboks go 6-4 for this season, or they wind up at 5-5 on the test matches so far this season. But that'll be Springboks versus All Blacks, and that is Saturday. And then Munster versus the Stormers later on Saturday in the afternoon. I'm a Stormers fan. As you can see, Western Province. Where's it at? Somewhere on this shirt right there. Western Province. I'm a Stormers fan. So you can catch Munster versus the Stormers in the second round of the URC. And then finally, Saturday night, late for South African audience, but here in the USA, it'll be 8 p.m. USA versus Uruguay in the USA seeking the America's #1 qualifier for the 2023 Rugby World Cup in France. So please feel free to become a subscriber on Rugby Ascendant if you're not already. And there you have it. I think somebody just became a subscriber, so thanks for that. And we'll see you there. All Blacks are very good, but they weren't very good last week, Patrick. They were atrocious. Sadly, the Springboks squandered a golden opportunity to defeat the All Blacks on a day in which they were terrible. They couldn't handle the high ball. They knocked on the ball repeatedly. They made stupid penalties they don't usually make. They dropped the ball in front of their 5-meter line, which Nkosi grabbed up and scored the try. So that was his only try of the game. The All Blacks were atrocious for their standard, and the Springboks frittered away a victory last week. The Springboks, as you can see here, my Springboks here, they're wounded. The Walking Dead, there's 2 Springboks lying down on the job here, and his bum in the air over here. My little bucket there, his bum is in the air because he's embarrassed at the performance of the Springboks. So they will remain incapacitated like that until the Springboks win a game. Hopefully it will be Saturday. We shall see. But go check it out, folks. Yeah, the Springless Bucks will be on against the All Blacks this Saturday, and I'll be doing live reaction commentary. Feel free to tune in for that. That's on Rugby Ascendant. I'll be back here in 56 minutes, and we will be covering Cyril Ramaphosa's address to South Africa. Thanks a lot, folks. Don't forget the volcano porn. Yeah, lots of volcano porn, lots of videos, little short clips about the La Palma volcano. Last night, some pretty incredible explosions. I did a little test last night, folks, to see what's going on with shadow banning. And, of course, I was correct about it. But let me tell you what I'm talking about. So last night I did 2 videos, one right after the other. One was 3 minutes. The other was 2 minutes. And I promoted the one video on external sources. And on the other one, I didn't tell anybody, just to see if people got announcements. One of them got 250% more views. That's the one that I promoted on my own than the one that YouTube was responsible for promoting. See the shadow banning? Anyway, bucka bum in the air. Exactly. That's where his bum is at. Get some sleep, says Patrick. Wilbur's still standing. Yeah, well, but Wilbur is a Hemsbach. Wilbur's up there. He's a Hemsbach. So he's not going to fall. Munster, says Rick Hearn. What else? Yeah, don't forget the volcano porn. Anyway, folks, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Once again, Gareth Cliff, Bye donkey. Kia labo. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it. You guys take care, and I'll be back here on the channel in less than an hour for Cyril Ramaphosa's Comedy Hour. Let's see what he has to say to South Africans tonight. Cheers, everybody. Smash the like button. Smash the like button.